Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh on the Mully and Haugh Show, Chicago Sports Radio, 670 The Score, weekdays 5:30 to 10. Dan Wiederer covers the Bears for the Chicago Tribune, and a busy day at Halas Hall. Dan, we saw the Bears add another player today. We saw Ryan Poles speak about the moves he did make leading up to today, and we heard from the new Bears. A lot of ground to cover, but we want to get as much quick reaction and analysis to our audience as possible. Where do you want to start? What was your biggest takeaway after spending time at Halas Hall?
Well, I'll start here. There were 6 new players introduced to us this afternoon at Halas Hall and this morning as well. And it's just a snapshot of how much roster restocking and overhauling is being done. You're looking at a team that's overhauling a lot. And David, it felt like walking onto college campus for freshman orientation. You don't know anybody. There's all these new bodies and faces walking in the room. You're saying hello, getting to know them for the first time, trying to feel them out. And we're just getting started with all the new people we have to meet, because keep in mind, about 6 weeks from now, we're going to have 10, 11, 12 draft picks that we're going to meet for the first time as well. So this is going to be a new look Bears team in 2023. And this is one step along the way of getting to know some of these guys.
You can get the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube, The Score 670, The Score's YouTube page, and you can download, listen, and subscribe. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. It's been a busy week. It's not over yet. So let's start with the latest news, and the latest news is the Bears signed a defensive tackle to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Dan, a pretty modest prove-it contract, and very similar to the kinds of things you see teams do when they're trying to add depth to their defensive line. Andrew Billings will join his 6th team in 7 years as an NFL player. He was a starter for the Raiders last season. He comes to the Bears and gives them that depth. I don't know if he projects as a starter. We don't know what kind of rotation they'll have. It's very early because there's still the draft and the rest of free agency. But what was your first reaction to the player that Ryan Poles didn't talk about because it happened after he left the podium?
Yeah, as a journeyman, David, that's joining the Bears to add depth and competition to the defensive front, which we've talked about for the last 3-4 days. They've done little there to fortify it. And so this is an effort to fortify it. Now, Andrew has made 51 starts during his NFL career. And so you've got a guy with starter experience, but there's no high level production there on his resume. And so you're basically looking at a guy that you hope can come in and be at best a starter, at worst a rotational guy that helps keep the linebackers that you just signed a big contracts behind you clean. But here we are in this next wave of free agency. I think we can all agree that the first wave of free agency has hit the shore and receded. And now the second wave is all about these value signings, about these prove-it deals, about trying to find guys that are hungry and available that can come in and try to take advantage of an opportunity. The Bears have more opportunity to offer than most teams. And so this is an example of the type of signing you're going to see here for the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
I don't want to neglect the backup quarterback that was signed, P.J. Walker, J. Walker. DJ Moore, no
periods.
No periods. I think it's a key distinction for a writer. So
TJ Edwards, periods.
Okay. See, now it's all very confusing.
Look, this is all very confusing because we have signed a DJ, a PJ, and a TJ this week, but also 2 Walkers, PJ Walker and DeMarcus Walker. So when I'm talking about college orientation, keeping everybody straight here in the early stages is not an easy chore.
That's okay. Just keep it away from any OJs. I think that would be safest. All right. So, Dan, how does PJ Walker, former XFL quarterback, fit into the plans? Remind me, if I'm not mistaken, Trevor Siemian still is under contract for 1 year. Is PJ Walker here to compete? Is he anointed? Is he the backup? What do you think of that move? Because I don't think we talked about it in our previous pod.
No, because it was a later signing. David, when PJ Walker signed, my initial instinct was that's it for Trevor Siemian. But PJ Walker came to the podium on Thursday afternoon and said, I'm here to compete for the backup role. So it takes some sifting through to see where they're going. The last we saw Trevor Siemian, he was headed for surgery, oblique, the one that he injured in pregame before the Jets game, which he played through and then aggravated further. And so you would believe that PJ Walker didn't take a 2-year, $5 million deal here to be a number 3. And so I would assume he'd be in the inside track to the backup role. But again, like you said, that we didn't get around. It was very limited time with Ryan Poles today. He had to get in and out of there in 13 and a half minutes. We didn't get around to asking him about the backup quarterback because we had a lot of other boxes to check, but that's certainly one we got to keep an eye on.
And the last we saw of PJ Walker, it was really his most famous moment of 22
Yeah.
was throwing to DJ Moore. The Hail Mary pass that was completed in the end zone and for a touchdown. And wasn't that the play where DJ Moore tore off his helmet and created the penalty? But that was PJ Walker on the other end of that reception throwing the pass. And I think that's an interesting thing to remember. But I also wonder, how his familiarity with DJ Moore factored into anything, or maybe it will just help be another familiar face. I don't want to make too much out of that, but it is interesting.
The helmet removal, if you recall, led to a missed kick by Eddie Pinheiro, which cost a football game. Bears fans can relate to that very well. Look, like obviously the familiarity between PJ Walker and DJ Moore is good for those two guys. PJ Walker said it himself Thursday afternoon that, hey, we were neighbors in Charlotte. And so just knowing that you've got somebody else that you can kind of get your feet on the ground with during this transition period, I think what sometimes gets lost in situations like all these guys are experiencing in the weeks and months to come is that there is a major transition that goes on for free agents that have to find a new home, get their families settled, try to figure out where they're living, get their feet on the ground, learn a new playbook, figure out the directions to the facility, figure out where you're going to go in the facilities. And so just having somebody that can navigate that with you, that you're close with, is helpful. Minor, totally minor in the big picture, but it's a little something. I thought as notable as anything was PJ Walker just talking about how DJ Moore's ability to separate is such a friendly thing for a quarterback, because he can create space that then allows you to feel like you can pull the trigger. And when we talk about the steps that Justin Fields has to make as a third-year passer in the NFL, that's one that he's got to make. And so to have a guy that consistently gets separation and uses his skills to get open should be a help to Justin Fields. It's obviously why he was such a priority in the trade. And you heard from Ryan Poles today saying, DJ Moore was the guy that made us react and move on this trade as early as we did.
And we'll get to what DJ Moore had to say about everything in a moment, but I want to start there with Ryan Poles and his 12 minutes that he shared with the Chicago Bears media. He talked about every player that he acquired. There's some specific things I want to get to, but Dan, overall, what was your biggest takeaway from hearing from the Bears general manager on Thursday?
So the dust has got to settle on all of this roster rebuilding to get a true comprehensive look at things. And I think Ryan understands that, he was forthright, I guess, in saying, look, like the urge for everyone, including those in the front offices, we got to fix everything and we got to fix it now. And we've got resources. And then you have to take a breath every 90 minutes and say, well, we're not going to fix everything. So just relax and take this one step at a time and figure out where to go. Now, along with that, David, you have to understand that, we're only going to hear about the Bears' successes in signing players, right? Because that's just how the free agency process works. And it's not until weeks or months up the road where you hear like, oh, they were in on so-and-so and the negotiations went sideways. And we don't have that intel yet. So we don't know how many plans on the best case scenario track that the Bears laid out before the week began, went astray for one reason or another. We do know that they were active in the offensive tackle market. We do know that they made an aggressive push toward Mike McGlinchey. He signed with the Broncos. Then Juwan Taylor came off the board. Then Caleb McGarry came off the board. Then Orlando Brown came off the board. And the Bears were left without one of the top shelf offensive tackles in this market. And Ryan Poles had to address that today and say that, look, like that's part of this process. And we were just married to value. And when the value got outside the range that we felt comfortable with, we had to say, okay, we'll move on. And they moved on a handful of different times for a handful of different reasons at that position. You figure it was similar at the defensive tackle position. We didn't get a chance to drill deeper down on that. Probably have to wait until the owners' meetings in a week and a half. But I guess my point here being is that we can't just assume that the Bears have gone to bed every night of this free agency period over the last 4 nights and been, got it, did exactly what we wanted to do today. I think there's probably been some frustration that we don't know about yet and may never know about.
Well, I want to start there because the Orlando Brown Jr. question is one that's going to nag me. And I don't know if it's only me, and I understand some of the explanations, but I want to get to those explanations. Let's start with the news. Overnight, Orlando Brown Jr. signed a 4-year, $64 million contract with $43.5 million guaranteed with the Cincinnati Bengals.
31 million in a signing bonus
up front. That's a lot of money up front. It's a contract that I expected to be bigger, frankly,
yes,
in terms of size and what the projection was because of the accomplishments that he brought to the table. We don't know some of the demands he might have made about playing on one side or another, but we do know based on reporting league wide and what we're aware of, but talking to some people too, that the Jets and the Steelers were the other two teams in on Orlando Brown Jr., not the Bears, not the team that has the biggest need at offensive tackle. And obviously, so that today, let's go back to Ryan Poles at the podium. He was asked about the suggestion that scheme might have, the lack of a scheme fit might have contributed to the decision and the thought process in pursuing Orlando Brown Jr.
Chief, you were with the Chiefs when you guys traded for Orlando Brown.
Yeah.
He was one of the premier free agents in this class. You guys need help on the offensive line. His number came in fairly reasonable. Why was that not in play for you guys or not a fit for you guys?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the specific player, but, the scheme match is a big deal there.
The scheme match is a big deal there, Dan. Where were you standing when he said that, and what is your initial reaction to that?
Front row, second seat from the left, facing the podium. I thought it was a really well asked question by Jason Leeser. He laid out the context of it all and got right to it with Ryan. I mean, I understand that they're looking for a specific match at that position for this, but look, like, again, you went into free agency with a bunch of guys on the top shelf, and we know that they swung at McGlinchey, and we know they didn't connect with McGlinchey, and so you have to have an eye on upgrading that position at some point, because again, as we sit here on Thursday afternoon and everything's unfolding, you're still looking at an offensive tackle group right now that is Braxton Jones, Larry Borum, and Kellen Deach. At some point, and I get it, they're going to be able to draft somebody. You're going to be able to take advantage of second and third waves of free agency. But my God, I would not be sleeping at night if I'm trying to put Justin Fields to a $300 million test in 2023, trying to see what he has and whether he's worth paying all that money long term, and having that be my offensive tackle rotation and group. Obviously, it's not going to be, right. Like, we know that,
but I know that. I guess what I still remain, it's a little dissatisfying, or I feel like it's unresolved in my head, because these aren't teams that were pursuing him that are bad teams. The teams he's coming from aren't bad organizations. So my thought is that, okay, if this is a very specific scheme issue that he doesn't fit, it's a square peg in a round hole. How is
he just
that
crossed the bridge from Kansas City to Cincinnati, right? Like the two teams that are competing for Super Bowls, and they both felt good enough with them,
or they felt like, even though they're married to their scheme, that there can be tweaks and adjustments, or he can be coached in a way that overcomes these limitations, if you even want to call them limitations. They certainly haven't limited his earning power and career. Now, you can make the argument that something got in the way of him signing the kind of contract we expected him to. But let's face it, he's still a very highly accomplished and decorated offensive tackle who is a free agent on the open market, and the Bears chose not to pursue him. And we're supposed to trust Ryan Poles' better judgment here, and I want to do that. And I think he's made some really good decisions along the way. But it's not carte blanche. It's okay to disagree here. It's okay to support that disagreement with what I just discussed. It doesn't make any sense to me, Dan. Neither did this comment from Ryan Poles. And I don't think we have the audio, but I want to read it to you. And I want you to tell me what you thought when he said this. Quote, "I think you can get in trouble if you go heavy with the biggest need and you fire away there and you let really good players walk away because you're too stuck on where you need to get players. Edmonds and Edwards, the linebackers he's talking about, are really good and at the top of their position." That's in reference to why the linebackers were pursued. But it also, I have a hard time understanding that premise, because he's saying that you can get in trouble if you go heavy and you address your biggest needs in free agency and you ignore the good players. What is the purpose of free agency if not to address your biggest needs?
I think philosophically what Ryan is saying makes sense in many years, in that, like, you don't want to be so blinded by need that you let good players at other positions go by the wayside because they don't fit your biggest area's needs. But we stressed for months that the whole reason that Chicago was gaga over losing 14 games and getting rid of every good player on their roster is because they were going to have an opportunity to have full flexibility and full opportunity. They didn't have to go down one lane. They could go down 3 or 4 lanes at once. They could go through the buffet and bring 3 plates back to the table because they were going to be able to choose off of so many different, platters, so to speak. And so like that, the answer you read there was why, after stressing that the need was for offensive line, defensive line, and corners in January, did the first two big signings of Monday come from the linebacker table, in the middle of your defense. And so that was Ryan's answer. And so I get what he's saying, big picture, on like, you don't want to be so blinded by need that you let a TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds get away. But it wasn't a one or the other here. Like, you could have had Tremaine Edmonds and still gone and signed a top shelf tackle.
See,
there was nothing that prohibited that on offense or defense. You could have signed a top shelf tackle,
right?
And they didn't. And so you're left. And so to the other point, you used a good word a couple minutes ago, and it was unresolved. And I'll be forthright here. I'm not an offensive line expert, and I rely on people that I know that know a lot more about that position than I do to help inform me. And so I've got homework over the next couple months to talk to people about scheme match and at what point does talent level supersede scheme match and your ability to work with things. And we're just going to have to dig around a little bit and figure out why, the Cincinnati Bengals felt really good about Orlando Brown. The Bears didn't. And certainly the Cincinnati Bengals can go to the starting gate of protecting Joe Burrow, feeling a lot better than, Larry Borum and Kellen Diesch as your current top line guys.
That's it. That's it for me too. I mean, it's a case of where guys who are in the business and guys who have worked in the NFL, and they can point to, or even fans who don't agree with you, they're going to say, you're not an offensive line expert, and what do you know? And,
I'm happy to say that.
Right. But I think what you do when you try to gather information or you just rely on your own experiences, you look at things that connect. Orlando Brown Jr., if he was a bad scheme fit for the Bears, and the Bears are identifying this as a problem, okay. But what was it about the other organizations, the two others that he excelled for and won with, and the Cincinnati Bengals, who were basically now a perennial Super Bowl contender, and the Steelers that were pursuing him as well?
Well, don't forget he also played for the Baltimore Ravens when Lamar Jackson was winning MVP awards.
So yeah, he played for Lamar in an offense like Lamar Jackson when he won the MVP in 2019. Justin Fields is here. It doesn't really, to me, it sounds like an excuse. It just does. And I respect where people are coming from. And I just think that it's okay to question these decisions, because you want the Bears to succeed, and every move to look like a genius one doesn't mean it is. So,
well, David, I mean, like, I am 100% behind you on that topic. And that's why this week has been strange for me. I had someone say to me on Wednesday evening, I lose track of the days here. Today's Thursday. On Wednesday evening, that you got to understand that the Chicago Bears tore down a 6-11 football team, right? A 6-11 football team that was 8-8 2 years before they tore it down. And right now, if you went position by position and tried to figure out what on the current roster is in better shape than it was for an 8-8 and 6-11 football team, you're not going to find very much, right? And so that leads back to the point that, oh my God, like, they just have so much work to do. And, some of the just the premature crowning of the moves for this week it's just baffled me in some circles, where you're like, what am I missing here? And so we'll just continue to progress. Again, we'll get to May 2nd. We'll see a 90-man roster at that point. We'll be able to agree with Ryan Poles at that point and say, correct, you didn't fix everything. You promised you couldn't fix everything. You didn't fix everything. Now here are some of the potentially fatal flaws that are still on your roster for 2023. And what do they mean for this team? But look, the 6 guys came in the building today, and we don't know how many of these guys will finish the contracts they just signed.
Exactly.
That's free agency, right?
That's free agency. That's a good point. Sorry for the digression. Let's keep moving ahead, and I'll get through this next few things a little bit quicker. So Ryan Poles, because of the flexibility that he now has, maybe by necessity or design, we'll wait and see, but he talked about the different offensive line combinations. I thought it was very interesting, Dan, before we hear what he has to say. Cody Whitehair at center is a possibility. Braxton Jones locked in at left tackle, in all likelihood. But this is what Ryan Poles sounded like when talking about the various combinations.
With the O-line, I'll stick to this. We're going to put the best front 5 up there. But I also think there's some flexibility in some conversations where Cody could work some center. He's got almost 4,000 snaps there, has some good seasons there. So we're going to move it around a little bit and see if we can get the best front 3 possible.
So Nate Davis came in today, David, and said that the last time he played left guard was in college at Charlotte. So it's a long way back. You wouldn't think that you would give a guy $30 million on a 3-year contract to make a position change. So Nate Davis is coming here to be your starting right guard. Okay, well, the guy who was kind of in that role toward the end of last season was Tevin Jenkins. Do you want to shift him over to left? Okay, if you shift him over to left, now that bumps Cody back inside the center. Ryan's end comment there was kind of, look, like we're trying to find the best combination of 3 on the interior, center, and both guards, and we'll move those pieces around with some other people in the mix, maybe a Lucas Patrick, maybe a draft pick, maybe a Jalen Carter, and figure out what works best there. But it's another example of, man, you've still got a lot of work there and a lot of piece reshuffling to do to stabilize a very important piece for the 2023 Chicago Bears, which is trying to make Justin more comfortable.
I don't think he was asked this directly, but Tevin Jenkins does have experience at right tackle. And you wonder, is he a potential option at right tackle? Because as we've talked about, they only have 3 under contract. They may draft one at number 9, but what do you think about him moving to right tackle?
So here's a couple things. Number one, that was one of about 4 questions that we didn't get to on my checklist this morning because Ryan had to get in and out so fast for some reason. Scratch my head on that. But Tevin Jenkins, as you understand, got bumped inside the guard last year because he was struggling a little bit at tackle. There's another misperception within the Chicago Bears fan base on how much of an answer Tevin Jenkins is at offensive line. And I don't know where it comes from, David, because I'm going to ask you right now, after 2 seasons, remember the Bears traded up in 2021 to get Tevin Jenkins at the top of the 2nd round. And there's been 34 games that the Bears have played since Tevin Jenkins became a member of the organization. How many of those games do you think he's played more than 50% of the offensive snaps in?
That's a really good question. I would say less than half.
Give me a number.
Of games that he's played more than 50% in, 10.
11. Right. So we've got 2 seasons and we've got 11 games in which Tevin has not been on the field for more than half the time that the offense has been on the field. So there is nothing here that says, oh, Ryan Poles, Ian Cunningham, go to sleep at night locking Tevin Jenkins in. There is nothing that says that his availability and his durability is suddenly going to become something where he's there for 17 games for the long haul. So look, he's going to be given an opportunity to start. He's going to be given an opportunity to compete. I don't think they see him moving back outside of tackle. It's something we're going to follow up on in the next couple of weeks here when we get a little more time with Matt and Ryan in Arizona at the owners' meetings. But just take a breath and take a step back when you're talking about Tevin Jenkins and understand that for this regime, the ability to stay on the field, the ability to be, consistently available and durable and reliable is paramount to what they want to do going forward. And Tevin certainly has not checked that box through 2 seasons.
And Braxton Jones certainly has in 1, the 5th round draft pick out of Southern Utah. His durability was one of his greatest assets as a rookie. He has a lot to work on. He's got to get in the weight room, live there, and take that next step. But let's face it, there's an opportunity in the draft at number 9 to take one of 2 guys who probably project as a left tackle. More ideally, Paris Johnson Jr. could be a guy who you envision playing left tackle. You draft at 9, you'd probably want to keep him there. You wonder if they would move Braxton Jones to the right side. Peter Skronsky, lesser so perhaps, although some people will tell you that the arm length issue is overstated. Doesn't matter. The point is that right now Braxton Jones is the left tackle, and would Ryan Poles be willing to move him if they drafted somebody or traded for somebody or signed somebody? This is what he had to say when asked about Braxton Jones.
For a young rookie from, Southern Utah to start and play every snap, I thought he did some really good things. We expect growth and development from him. He's working out, getting bigger, stronger. So right now, he's the starting left tackle. If we create competition and move guys around to see what the best 5 is, that's what we'll do.
Right now.
Yeah, and brought up the idea of moving things around, Look, I think we understand that for the Chicago Bears to take a encouraging step forward in 2023, they are going to have to be a lot better on the offensive line and the defensive line. And right now, to use Ryan's words, there is nothing that indicates that they're going to be any better at either of those positions. Again, we still have 6 more weeks until they stabilize their, most of their roster going into OTAs. But my God, I don't feel good about either side of the ball when you're talking about the trenches.
Wow, that's a little deflating, but I think that I can't argue with that because you did come into free agency wanting to address what were our priorities we've been harping on in this podcast and everywhere else. Offensive and defensive tackle, offensive and defensive line, start from the ball on out. It gets repetitive and redundant, and yet it remains unaddressed. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on moving forward. Okay, let's get to the new players, because of all the ones we heard from, I feel like there are a couple questions I have for you. Let's begin with DJ Moore, who I think is a guy that is going to be easy for fans to like. He was at the Bulls game already with Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool running the show. It was cool. The Bulls gave them jerseys. What was your just overall impression? It seemed like it had to be a strong one for DJ Moore at the podium at Halas Hall.
So I'll say this. He was asked what he was going to miss about Carolina, and he said the houses, which we assumed and we interpreted as DJ has started a house hunt here in Chicago, and he's had some sticker shock of what he's experiencing as someone who moved from Carolina back to the Midwest, a decade ago. I understand what he's experiencing, and so my heart goes out to DJ as he continues a house hunt. I will also say that as someone that makes just a touch less money than DJ, he'll be fine. He'll find a nice house that fits into his price range, and he'll settle in quite significantly. I think that I think DJ Moore is a dude who's got a real calm inner confidence about himself. I think you can feel that in his first meeting. He's not going to be this outspoken, bombastic receiver, but he's going to give you what you want in terms of work, in terms of trying to develop chemistry with Justin Fields. You saw him at the Bulls game on Wednesday night with Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool, trying to get an early chemistry with guys he's going to be working a lot with. I'm just excited to hear from Luke Getsy on what he likes about DJ Moore and how he can fit him into his offense, and then how he can use all three of those guys that we just talked about complementary, right? And how do each one of those guys fit a niche within the offensive system that allows them all to be at their best in certain ways that then allows Justin to be at his best.
And well, that's the key. And I think that's what was refreshing to hear DJ Moore, who's been a Bear for 5 minutes, come in and understand, like every free agent who made the choice of, signing with the Bears, they understand a big reason why was because Justin Fields is doing this, is ascending, and he wants to be a part of that. And DJ Moore knows how he can help with that. And that's what he had to say about playing with Justin Fields.
I'm real excited. I heard a lot of good things. We've been talking it up for a few days, so looking forward to get on the field.
So he's been talking it for a few days. It's a big jump for DJ Moore because he has played with a variety of quarterbacks, none of them consistent. And if Justin Fields achieves the consistency that all these moves are intended to provide and sustain, this is going to be a dynamic duo.
I think we have a tendency to look at these guys sometimes as football players only, right? And we forget that they're just normal, everyday humans. And so when DJ Moore is kind of recounting Friday's trade and saying he was walking down his driveway to get some packages and he got a message on his phone or a call on his phone that alerted him he was traded, and he was just like, all right, whatever, we'll see what's next. You get this very human reaction to something that the rest of the world is like, holy cow, blockbuster trade. And then this dude's just going to get some packages and then realizing he's got to uproot his life, come to Chicago and get to know a new quarterback, a new franchise, all those things. You have to hope that the chemistry between Fields and DJ Moore clicks in quickly. Right. It's got to be something that's natural and is there right away. And, look, like you've got months now. They can go wherever they want to go in the offseason to work together. They can get back here for OTAs and minicamp and grind it out. They can get to training camp and spend extra time working together. But by the time we get to the first week of September, they better be ready to go. Because Chase Claypool last year, it was like, oh, well, it's really hard to just parachute in. And I agree with that. In the middle of the season, without going through all these offseason machinations and learning the playbook and all those things, it's hard to get your feet on the ground. Well, now there's a runway here for DJ Moore for 6 months to get his feet on the ground and be ready to produce at the level he was producing in Carolina for the Chicago Bears. And that's going to be a must if they're going to go in any way in the direction that they want to.
He came to the Bears via trade. The two big ticket linebacker items, Tremaine Edmunds and TJ Edwards, also spoke on Thursday, Dan. One at a time, I think Tremaine Edmunds talked about the allure of the tradition of the Chicago Bears linebackers, and he talked about making an impact in his style of play, and he comes from a very good defense and a very strong organization. Here's what surprised me. He talked about being the man in the middle. in his words. And I think I didn't know, and I think we also talked about, we projected him as a weak side linebacker in the Shaq Leonard mold in that role. But it sounds like he might be the middle linebacker playing the position that Brian Urlacher played. And that was a comp for him coming out of Virginia Tech in 2018. And now he gets a chance to play in the similar defense, the same scheme. And all he's got to do is achieve the same results, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's same results. I've got to hear from Matt Eberflus on this because of the vision. I want to hear the vision from the coach himself, because we've been led to believe that the weak side linebacker in this particular system is the money position. Well, you will go out and you give a guy, $50 million to play the middle, and you go out after saying that ball production is a priority for you, and then you sign a guy that doesn't have any ball production in his first 5 years. I will say this: of all the 6 guys that came to the podium on Thursday, it was Tremaine Edmunds, and then a close second is DeMarcus Walker. In terms of presence, I know you're big on first impressions when guys get up and meet the media for this first time, but Tremaine Edmunds had an energy to him that was natural. It was infectious, and it gave you an early impression of why he was a team captain at the age of 21 for the Buffalo Bills, because he just has that about him. He's got an enthusiasm about him, but an understanding of what it takes to be great. And he's going to have to take the next steps in his ascent. Ryan Poles praised him for his length, for his speed, for his coverage ability, and said he's special. Well, now it's time for Tremaine Edmunds to show that. The other thing I thought was notable, David, was Tremaine Edmunds came here in 2018 to Halas Hall when he was a draft prospect. And he came in on a pre-draft visit before the current Halas Hall was expanded and renovated and had all these beautiful amenities to it. And he was very forthright today in saying it's a lot nicer now, and like there's everything here you could want, and it wasn't quite like this 5 years ago. So that was kind of a cool thing when you realize that not that long ago this guy was just a young kid coming in for a top 30 visit, and now he's projected to be the star of your defense.
In all seriousness, what role does that play, you think? Because in all of the guys, free agency, the amenities, Halas Hall has been upgraded and refurbished into a first-class operation, and gone are the days with the perception of the Bears going on the cheap. But you walk into that facility and it's so good that former players are jealous, and they're like, why wasn't it like this when we were here? But I wonder what role that played in some of these guys if they were undecided, either here or there, Halas Hall, and the way that it has been renovated, if that helps weigh their decision.
Well, so I would say this: I don't think it played any factor in these decisions, right? Like, I think that more times than not, money speaks as loud as anything that you've got out there. And when players are trying to weigh 2 options against each other, usually it's who's in better position to win. If the offers are close. And so the Bears are playing from behind in that regard. But I do think that there is word of mouth in the NFL, and players know each other, and they talk to each other, and they know what buildings are like, and they know what cultures are like, and they know what leadership styles are like, and they know what the amenities are like. And the Bears have all that in place. And this is probably a short aside to say that Ryan Pace deserves credit for the vision he had. One of his greatest accomplishments as the general manager of the Chicago Bears was having the vision, selling it to George and Ted, getting the financing to do it, and then putting together this wing, on the building. Plus, not to mention the 2 new practice fields on the south end of the campus that have become major amenities for the Chicago Bears. And so when you've got a guy who came on a pre-draft visit 5 years ago and was underwhelmed, and then came in today for his first day on the job as the Bears and was like, wow, this is gonna be a fun place to work. You understand that there is a little bit of juice that comes with that, and that's part of what we do here.
5 years ago, TJ Edwards was a linebacker for Wisconsin on his way to being a really good Big Ten player, undrafted out of Wisconsin, went to the Eagles and made a name for himself. And now here he comes playing for his hometown team. Dan, he made a strong impression. Again, he was on the radio we talked about the other day. Within hours of committing to the Bears, you couldn't find somebody more satisfied and happier to, be where he is in his professional life. He's definitely energized. I want to ask you this, though. I thought Jack Sanborn was his buddy. He's taking his number. Is he really going to wear 57? Wasn't that Sanborn's number? How do you explain that?
That's a good question. I didn't realize he was taking the number. I didn't realize those guys had already put those jerseys in. Maybe he gave him a good chunk of cash that he got from this new deal here. And Jack said, yeah, thankfully, I'll happily put on a different number. I will say this about TJ Edwards. Like, you just feel it. You feel what people around the league say about him, particularly people in Philadelphia. He's just rock solid. He's just rock solid. He's going to be dependable. He's going to be a rock solid guy for you. And sometimes when you're on in this phase of the resurgence process, you need guys that are just rock solid, and I think T.J. Edwards is going to fit that bill.
DeMarcus Walker was entertaining, certainly. I want to ask you about Travis Homer, though.
Yeah.
The running back who talked about his playing assignment football and doing the little things. What role did you get any more clarity? What role he might play this year?
Yeah, I do think that Travis Homer was brought here because he's got a little bit of change of pace to him. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's got an ability to play special teams for you. I think the Bears saw him as a guy that could be a four core special team guy and playing all four phases of special teams. And so he's going to be a complementary part. I think they're still searching some more sizzle for the backfield, a little more speed, and we'll see what they do in the draft. That's just kind of one of those additions that you need to do as you're building up the depth of this roster. I apologize. I don't know if you can hear the background at all. We've got a little bit of home renovation going on here.
Is that a drone in the background of the Wiederer household? I'm worried about some sort of drone being shot down or something like that.
There's some bathroom renovations going on beneath me, and so there's a little bit of sawing going on. So I just wanted to apologize. I didn't want anyone to think that I had an adverse reaction to the lunch I had this afternoon.
Apparently, you are a rebuilding expert.
We'll see. I mean, I know, like Ryan had described this last year as one of those HGTV shows, and so I'm just trying to meet the criteria.
All right, last couple things. I wanted to, maybe next time we'll talk about it, maybe get the clip, because Stacey Dales was on the Mully and Haugh show on Thursday morning. And I asked Stacey about the running back position after David Montgomery. And we talked about how the breakdown would come with Khalil Herbert and maybe drafting somebody in the middle rounds. She said that she believes that Bijan Robinson might be the best player in this draft, and that she was very high on his personality, his charisma. And at number 9, Stacey Dales, just based on being around him at the combine, talking to people, that it wouldn't be that far of a reach to draft him at the 9th spot. And I said to her, I said, Stacey, okay, the hook is in my lip. I've taken the bait. I understand, and I wouldn't criticize that move, Dan, even though there are still other moves. And then Ryan Poles gets to the podium and he talks about not being swayed by the need, not being swayed by this, that the best player at the highest value might be a guy that fits. And maybe that's Bijan Robinson. I don't know.
Well, I told you on our last episode that I will buy the 99 cases that are made for why you don't take Bijan Robinson now and at this stage of your development. And then that one thing in the back of my head that says, if they took him, I wouldn't shoot it down, because I like, the one thing you learn over time in the NFL is that, particularly when you're picking in the top 10, you want the closest thing to a sure thing as possible. You don't want to be looking back and going, man, we drafted Kevin White, man, we drafted Mitch Trubisky, whatever it may be. You want a guy that has all pro potential, that's going to go to multiple Pro Bowls, that has a chance to give you every week high level contributions. And Bijan Robinson checks those boxes. And I don't think anyone's going to look back in 6 years and regret drafting Bijan Robinson. It's just a matter of, is it the right time for a franchise that has so many other needs to do it? And so that's why I say, like, you can make really strong cases and stronger cases not to take them, but it's that one case to take them. I can't get past it. I really can't. And then we're going to spend the next 6 weeks trying to figure out how to juggle that if you're Ryan Poles.
In these last 2 minutes, tell me what you think in terms of the overall upgrade Andrew Billings and DeMarcus Walker offer the Bears defensive line, and what positions.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Billings is a guy that has history playing the nose. He's got versatility to do either on the interior or defensive line. I think Marcus Walker came in today, and certainly is, Brad Biggs, Rich Campbell, and I had a great saying back in the day that when a guy comes to the podium and gives you what DeMarcus Walker gave us today in terms of energy and honesty and unfiltered commentary, you say he's having a great camp. Right? Like it's the running joke. Like DeMarcus Walker hasn't been on the field yet, but he's having a great camp, because you want guys like that around for our purposes. I still have questions about why it took so long for him to get unlocked from a production standpoint, and how the Bears can continue to bring that production out of them. We'll see where they go. I just think right now these are space fillers. They're guys that are going to plug holes for now until upgrades are available, and then you got to figure out where those upgrades are going to come from.
I agree. And by the way, it would be remiss of me not to give credit to your guy, Cairo Santos, who gave up his number 2 jersey, and he will wear number 8 because DJ Moore is number 2.
congrats to Cairo for moving on. And that's Rex's number. Is he allowed to take Rex's number?
Well, is that Rex's number, or is that who else wore number 8? A lot of people since Rex Grossman wore number 8. I just wonder if Jaquan Brisker is going to give up number 9 when they sign Robbie Gould out of the blue.
See, so you're still waiting on the Robbie reunion.
I haven't seen any headline yet. I don't know if is he still on the street. Anything else, Dan? We didn't talk about anything else that we need to touch on before we
one footnote for me. The Bears obviously were at Georgia's Pro Day on Wednesday, and they watched Jalen Carter, as we documented in our last episode, stumble a little bit through the process. Well, Ryan Poles made it clear today that Jalen Carter's on their list for a top 30 visit. They want to bring him into Halas Hall. They want to learn a lot more about him. They want to get to the bottom of some things, and it'll be really in mid to late April that they put together a final evaluation on Jalen Carter and figure out if that's the direction they'd be comfortable going. I will say this. It was notable that among the Bears contingent that traveled to Athens, Georgia, the middle of this week, their director of security, John Tarpey, was there, and he wasn't just there to be a bodyguard for Ryan Poles, right? There is a team put together and setting forth to get as much information as possible on what went on with Jalen Carter in connection to that fatal car accident in Georgia in January. And there's a lot of investigating, a lot of homework that needs to be done for an organization to make this big of a decision for their long-term future on a player that's got a lot going on in his life.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because of the latest is that he pleaded no contest and he was sentenced to community service, I believe. And so that is in the next phase of that story. And you wonder how NFL teams will interpret that. I still think that, cynically speaking, more teams will be concerned about his poor workout at Pro Day, his maybe the focus and maturity level than they are about what happened on that night, because it's a football equation right now for most people if they're willing to draft him and how high they're willing to draft him, because the higher you go, the more risk is involved.
Yeah, I mean, words that I heard even before all this stuff surfaced this month were maturity and personal investment, and you've got to get your arms around that. Where is he? And we'll have the month of April to see where the Bears go with that. I'm sure we'll have reports when he does come in to town for his top 30 visit, and we'll just have to continue to keep our fingers on the pulse of that.
Okay, last thing, Final Four, take the North version. Bama, Duke, Houston, Gonzaga. I've got Bama beating Houston in the final. I hate myself for picking Alabama. I hope they lose in the second round because they're not losing right now in the first round, but they are the best basketball team in the tournament. I think they cut down the nets, and then, they can celebrate.
My bracket is downstairs right now, so I need to know the bottom right corner who's in that with Kansas, because I know I have Bama, Marquette, Houston, and I think I picked Kansas, but I'm sorry, I got UCLA, right?
You got UCLA?
UCLA's the 2 with Kansas, right?
They're going down against Gonzaga.
That's what I got. And
16.
I've got a Houston-Marquette championship game with Houston outlasting Shaka Smart.
What do you know about college basketball? It's not like you wrote the book on it.
To be honest with you, I know less now about college basketball than I ever have, which is sad because I used to know a ton about it. But I do think this year, by the way, we're recording this episode right now while Illinois is playing. I don't even know what the Illini are doing right now. You're killing me here.
Oh no.
But I will say this, that this is the most wide open year that I've ever seen in terms of the mediocrity in the sport. So when Furman upsets Virginia and all these other things start happening, there are like the difference between 3 seeds and 14 seeds anymore. It's minimal. This is going to be a mad tournament with just a bunch of mediocre teams beating each other.
We got to get out of here. Illinois is missing already the 10 threes, and Brad Underwood's already hoarse. And it's not even to the first TV timeout.
I guarantee you they've wasted at least a half dozen possessions while we've been recording this episode.
I guarantee you he's in a bad mood already. He's a great guest, though. We love him on the Mully and Haugh Show. All right, so for Dan Wiederer, Adam Studzinski, I'm David Haugh. We'll come back if there's more news. Thank you for tuning in this week, all week, on the Take the North podcast. Lots of free agent stuff. Dan, what's the last word on this one?
ILL.
Oh, please. No way. This is not going to be an Illini podcast. ILLMIA maybe today. All right. We'll find out what happens in the tournament. Keep track of free agency. We'll be back if some news breaks. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app. Thank you for watching on YouTube, the 670 The Scores YouTube page. We'll be back when there's news. I'm David Haugh for Dan Wiederer. Talk to you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.